Hi everyone. Well, first of all, what a great job all the other startups have done. Give everyone a hand for courage, perseverance, not easy. And thanks everyone, amazing presentations all day. I think personally I've been very inspired. But anyway, to the matter at hand, metaMe. Data has become a fundamentally valuable resource in our lives. It's changed everything. You think about it, how we speak, what we eat, where we go, who we talk to, how we get there, when we're ill, what we're ill with, etc., etc. All of these things are picked up as sensors, and they're driving the economy. And as the world pivots from an industrial economy to a digital economy, data becomes the key resource. And we've all heard the phrase that data is the oil of the 21st century, and that's true. But I would argue that beyond just being the oil of the 21st century, it's the currency. The question we have to ask ourselves is, why can't we spend it? It's a big number, $4.7 trillion. That's just one sector. That's the healthcare sector in the United States. $4.7 trillion of value created in an industry, and has anybody here earned any of that? Anyone? Any hands? Any show of hands?
No.
Do we think we've contributed to that?
Yes.
At least from a data perspective? Probably quite so, right? And though we're not able to spend this data, others are. Healthcare, as an example, is twice as likely to be hacked as any other form of data. Twice as likely. So there's a massive cyber crime industry that's spending our data. And aside from that, then there's the robber data barons. We all know who they are. One of them was here yesterday, actually, who also have this kleptocratic attitude to our data. And they're spending it. They're making shed loads of money from it. So we have to ask ourselves, does it really have to be this way? Is it possible that there could be a better way? Is it possible that access to this phenomenal information highway, this platform for all these great innovation and services, could come at a price that doesn't cost us our privacy? Is it possible that we could be at least as free digitally as we are physically? Well, maybe it is. Let's explore that for a moment. What would we need for that to be a reality? Well, we need some universal standards around our data and how it's used. And this is both as individuals and enterprises. We'd also need governance principles so that we can understand that when the value of this data is distributed, it's done in an equitable manner that we're all able to benefit from as citizen consumers, as enterprises, and as society as a whole. And then we need dependable technology to enforce this. Hi, I'm Dele Atanda. I'm CEO of metaMe. And this vision is what we work on daily to deliver as our mission. Essentially, we go about this through three primary tools: an asset, a network, and a platform. Now, to address this issue, we've structured ourselves in two entities. We have an NGO, which we formed in 2013 with three mandates. The first was establishing a universal declaration of digital rights as an extension of human rights. And to put that simply, we know that in the digital world, human rights need to be applied in a different way. We then established, and we're engaged with the United Nations directly on that effort. We are working with the British Standard Institute to codify an ethical data standard, which is currently in public consultation and will be published as the British Standard next month. We are then working with NIST and other standards agencies around the world to codify this as an ISO standard. And then metaMe then builds technology as an enterprise, as a commercial enterprise, based on these principles and standards to codify them and enforce them. And at the center of our innovation is what we call the M-Pod. And what's the M-Pod? It's the simple way of putting it is it's like the next evolution of the bit. So when you think about data, it's ridiculous, right? Since the dawn of the computer, the only measure we have for data is its size. Bits, kilobits, megabits, gigabits, etc. And obviously, as we move into a world where we have 5G, broadband, SATCOMs, etc., the size of data is actually perhaps the least relevant thing. What's most important is the level of sensitivity, the privacy, the confidentiality. So endpoints are designed to be able to measure these things. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we need to get away from relying solely on perimeter security. The barbarians are at the wall, and I hate to break it to you, they're probably going to get in. So if we're solely reliant on perimeter security, we have a fundamental flaw in our thinking. Endpoints allow us to put security into the assets themselves. Thirdly, they're programmable, so we can actually make them intelligent in terms of how they're accessed and when they're accessed. And lastly, they're auditable, they're trackable. So combined, we call this trusted data and trustless data sharing, because we can codify our data assets to regulate who accesses them, meaning we don't have to trust the entities that we share them with, we can simply trust our data to enforce our rules on our behalf. And that, because we can measure data in this way, we therefore can quantify it. And being able to quantify it allows us to transform data from this digital exhaust into a currency that's spendable, that we can own and spend in a real way. All sounds great and very abstract and okay, fascinating, but what does that mean in real life, okay? I'm sure that's what everyone's asking. So a couple of use cases I'm going to walk you through. So the first one here, we're working with IBM on a pilot with employees, where basically we're asking employees to share emails and posts that they make on social media confidentially with themselves, and an algorithm that analyzes it and assesses their levels of stress. So this enables employees to figure out if they index high on stress levels, and if they do, then they can share this information, should they so wish, with service providers who can make recommendations to them on how to manage that stress. Now, obviously, that could be a very scary scenario. Employees are very concerned about their data. So the ideal is trustless data sharing, whereby we can encode the data to ensure that the data isn't shared in a way that exposes employees is really key to that. And I can go into it in more detail, but I think that gives you a grand overview. It's a very big sector, and the revenue potential in that space is considerable for us, as you can see in the figures here. The second use case, what I want to show you, which I'm really excited about, is something we call MetaCard. And MetaCard, to put it very simply, is essentially a credit card for your data. So it's all well and good to talk about spendable data, and I'm really excited to talk about the partnership we're doing with Keyless. What an amazing technology, huh? But essentially, with this here, I can basically scan code. Let me just scan. Effectively, this card, it can serve as an identity card. There you go. And you'll see in a second, it will tell me exactly what credits I have on it. So that can be money, that can be information, that can be anything. The magic thing about this, though, and it's triple level encryption, so this is beyond banking grade encryption, it's trifactor with biometrics, as we heard earlier. This is digital inclusion around the world. And you know what? You don't even need a phone. You don't need a phone. There's no application fee, there's no interest. You don't have to load money onto it because you already have the money which is in your data. So we're really excited about that as an opportunity. Team-wise, we've all been battle-hardened or trained by blue-chip enterprises, IBM, Accenture, Citibank, JP Morgan. Our advisors are MIT fellows and members who've worked directly with the European Union, the United Nations, etc. I can give you more details on that on your interest. We have raised just over $500,000 in a friends and family round. We formed a company last August. We are currently in a seed round, 10 million pre-10.8 post, and our plan is to go to a Series A towards the end of H1 for around about 6.2 million. Obviously, these use cases are significant and important. But there's an opportunity here to do something that's bigger than even that. And that's to fundamentally redesign the data economy. We all know about the problems of the current model. We all know the challenges that it throws to society writ large. And we believe there's a better way. And we call this the economy of self. We don't intend on getting there alone. We're building a consortium called META, the MetaNet Ethical Technology Alliance. We're already talking to a couple of anchor partners to work with us to codify this protocol and propagate it. So my ask to you is, if you're part of an organization who can help us in shaping this future through the MetaNet Consortium, I'd love to hear from you. If you have experience of software technologies that have been disruptive and that how they've gone from small capitalization stages to mass adoption, again, I would love to hear from you. So thank you very much. I'll take questions.
Business model is a bit murky for me, so let's try to clarify. Who do you sell to?
So in simple terms, we're a double-sided marketplace. Mm-hmm. Enterprises on one hand buying data from individuals selling data sets to enterprises. So there's a marketplace in that we make a market and we charge a commission for those transactions. We sell these endpoint assets in the marketplace and we charge a commission for that. That's essentially one model. The second model is really licensing. So we build like this well-being application that I showed you with IBM will become a white label application which we can license to enterprises who may have marketplace transactions in it or not. So it's a software as a license, a software as a service agreement where we license an application to them. What we're also finding is a lot of interest in a third revenue stream is with enterprises who want to sell their data and monetize their data in the same way that we as individuals might want to do. And there are some complexities in that, but essentially, if it doesn't involve customer data of any shape and form, it's pretty straightforward. We can use our technology in very much the same way we do as individuals. If it does involve customer data, then we have to integrate customers into that process, which can take longer.
And the other part that's a little unclear to me is, what is the incentive? I mean, obviously money, but what is the incentive for a user to share? Like you gave one example where you said users would be sharing their email, give feedback on their stress levels. Like, can you go a little deeper on that? Because I'm not clear on why I would give my data to someone. So I'm assuming I'm not getting that much money for it.
Sure. That's the first false narrative. So there are a lot of false narratives in this data space about the value of your data. So as an example, the typical number is that your data is worth $17.50. Facebook have put out this number. So people believe it. I'll give you a simple example, clinical trials. The average cost of recruiting someone to a clinical trial is $20,000. The average cost of retaining someone in a clinical trial is $7,000. It's ubiquitous. So if you can actually generate leads for clinical trials, which is driving the whole pharmaceutical and biotech industry, then you can monetize that data for thousands of dollars. So that, first of all, is a false narrative. Secondly, in terms of this particular use case with IBM, so the first thing we saw is that in the workshops that we've run with IBM, we basically saw employees, enterprise, healthcare service providers. The biggest factor that would optimize the needs and the different needs of all three groups was more data. And the most valuable type of data was employee data. But the biggest hurdle to employees providing data was concerns around privacy. But employees, on the other hand, had two big concerns. One was privacy, which we discussed. The second was convenience, because they're overwhelmed and they don't have time to go through all the healthcare services to figure out which ones are right for them. So if there was some means where they could get some curation or some personalized, customized direction, that would be hugely valuable to them. So in summary, there's really three core value propositions to consumers. Prosperity, which is about making money from your data, which can be significant. Privacy, security, which we understand, and convenience in terms of being able to actually have a more seamless life, better services. And that's where we think the real future lies in terms of being able to deliver new classes of data-driven services like Uber or Lyft or Airbnb. All these things couldn't exist without the availability of high, rich, real-time data that drives these services.
And the last question, just 10 million your pre-revenue. What was the calculation? How did you come up with 10?
We raised money through a small VC this year, so they priced the round in our discussions extensively there. We've developed a lot of technology. We have IP. Our model is that our core IP around MPODs will be open source, but nonetheless we have patent pending on that technology. We've built out a lot of the alphas or the components of the systems. Our standard that we're developing with the British Standards Institute, as I say, is poised to be published next year. So this gives us a significant strategic advantage in terms of we've already built our technology. I mean, we effectively wrote the standard with the BSI, so we've already built the technology with the standard embedded into it, which gives us a significant advantage in terms of pacing the market. And it's already, for example, being used to drive a regulation in Wyoming, which is trying to position itself as a data blockchain-friendly jurisdiction in the US. And we see a massive change of regulation coming in the US, probably not next year, but certainly in 2021. So we're really ahead of the curve in terms of our regulatory and policy work.
Could you just dig into the business model a little bit more, specifically with the NHS example? So you have consumer over here who's the supplier of data, you have the NHS, you have these different providers who are looking at that data and want to provide services back, I assume. Where's the flow of funds in that, and where people can't make any money?
Can I assume Chatham House rules here?
No.
You can talk in generalities.
Okay.
You don't need to give us a
so the NHS pilot is not consumer focused, it's actually focused on doctors. And it will simply be they will license our software to provide as a service to doctors.
So if my firm was to invest, would we be investing in an NGO and META also, or just metaMe?
In metaMe, so just solely in metaMe. metaMe is an impact enterprise, but it's a Delaware C Corp,
Okay.
and it holds essentially it's master of the IP for most of the aside from the stuff that's built.
Do these other things consume some of your time?
Yes, but I think there's 4 codes to be successful in this space. You need ethical code, you need legal code, you need computer code, and you need economic code. So you cannot be successful without all of those. The Internet Foundation gives us the ethical and legal code component, so we see that as a massive advantage. We can therefore become the trusted organization that is delivering this, and this is ourselves through the consortium. So again, being able to corral other consortium members is underpinned by the NGO, but there's obviously huge commercial focus there. And what we've learned in the blockchain space, and I've consulted in that area extensively with IBM, is that companies can't work with NGOs. They need an enterprise as well, but they like the idea of having an NGO that doesn't own the network and the infrastructure in place.
Nice presentation. You have a big task in front of you.
Yeah.
But that's good, right? Big returns. What do you think on the timeline perspective it's going to take to get to scale revenue, and how much capital you think you need to consume to get there?
That's a great question. If you'd asked me at the beginning of this year, would it be possible that by May, not only Apple, but Google and Facebook would be competing on privacy? As I did a keynote in New York yesterday, I was coming back through DC Union Square, and these adverts from Google talking about, we give you privacy, you change your setting, I took pictures of them, I thought this is ridiculous, privacy watching. So where I'm going with this, if you'd asked me if that was possible in May, I would have said not possible. I would have said maybe we're 2-3 years out from them coming to this sort of play. So there's a big quickening that's happening. There is an acceleration. If you ask me ordinarily, I would say, so our plans are to, in our A round, effectively to build out a kind of strong ecosystem, minimum viable ecosystem with a handset of enterprise partners that can position us to be able to be an alternative to the status quo. And we see that it will take us 18 to 24 months to be in that position in terms of built code and built pilots and running projects. But I think in terms of adoption from that point onwards, I really do think the market is coming towards us. I think the whole social movement is coming towards us. So our challenge is really execution and execution pace and speed. I think that's going to be our barrier rather than pushing and trying to drive adoption.
But you need policy to help you, correct? Am I wrong in saying that there are big pocketed enterprises that may not want you to be successful anyway?
But we're ahead of that game. So with the Internet Foundation, we were one of the groups driving for GDPR, and we engaged with the Article 29 group in Europe. So in 2018 was a land shift And a lot of companies, because it's ineffective to have, even Facebook say they're going to apply GDPR across the world. MasterCard have said that, have actually implemented GDPR policies across the world. So the legislation is already ahead now. It's not, there is a gap with GDPR around data ownership. I think someone mentioned it earlier. But in terms of consent, privacy, compliance, it's coming, and it's probably going to give you risk. I think what American companies are starting to understand, and again, we were approached directly by Facebook in 2015 to participate in a program, because they saw this coming in, is that legislation may actually be more extreme in the States than it is in Europe. And we see that already in California, for example, with CCPR. So I think legislation is on our side.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dele. Appreciate it.